Welcome to the Digital Marketing Insights podcast, brought to you by Brightside Digital.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to say we have Pam Ryan today, who is a self-employed content writer and content creator and copywriter actually. So Pam, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this chat and how it goes. It's my very first podcast as a guest, so a bit nervous but very excited. Yeah.
No, I'm excited to talk to you, and I suppose the starting point is, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your career to date, please?
Okay, so going back a bit now, but so I got my bachelor's degree in journalism and new media actually in the University of Limerick, and after graduation, I took an internship at the Irish Examiner, and so funny, I went into the internship thinking like I would spend 2 weeks at the digital desk, 2 weeks at the pictures desk, 2 weeks at the news desk, and so on. And I started off at the digital desk, and the editor there wouldn't let me go, so I spent all 3 months at the digital desk. So a lot of my digital marketing sort of expertise comes from learned experience there and training there. And what better place than a national newspaper, just throw you in the deep end and see if you swim. And after that, I got my master's degree in creative writing, also at the University of Limerick. And it's just a bit of unfortunate serendipity that someone at the Irish Examiner, as soon as I graduated from that, she broke her wrist. So I was called in for 6 months cover there. And it was great to be back in that environment. It's very fast paced and the Irish Examiner was also the first place to give me my first like proper professional journalism job. While I was there on my internship, someone from the Echo, which is part of the Irish Examiner family, had sought me out for a feature on the Irish Redhead Convention. As you can see, I'm the perfect person for that. For anyone listening, I have very red hair. And I continued to freelance for them then while I was doing my master's as well. And I still do pieces for them from time to time. So after my time was up at the Examiner, I continued to freelance. And then I joined the Number One Media Group. And that's where my journey with copywriting really started. And again, that was one of those things where just thrown in the deep end and see if you swim. And I did. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed that customer service aspect and really getting to know clients. Whereas with journalism, you go in, you have this really in-depth, intimate conversation with someone, and then you may never see them again. With copywriting, that's different. You build relationships and you continue to work with those clients. And let me see, after that, I was working in Youghal with the with Cork App and Middleton and Youghal News, and it was a wonderful experience and a very varied job. But the commute from Cork City to Youghal when you're taking public transport was not sustainable for me. That's a wonderful argument for remote working and hybrid working, by the way. No one is that productive when they have to get up at the crack of dawn to be in their workplace for 8:30 or 9 a.m. Nobody. And after there, this is the wonderful thing about journalism and writing in general. You have this opportunity to freelance between your like dream jobs. With other industries, you don't really have that opportunity, but with creative jobs, you can do that. And then I started working at Wedding Dates. It's a wonderful company, but I started on, I believe it was the 4th of March, 2020. So as you can imagine, I wasn't there that long because the wedding industry shut down overnight because of COVID and lockdowns and whatnot. It's just a pity because I really loved working with that team despite how little time I'd spent there. So after that, for a long time, I told people after that I was freelancing and whatnot. But for quite some time after that, I actually wasn't working at all. I took a much needed break for myself. It was like a mental health break. And I know this isn't exactly the topic of the podcast, but I think it's important as well when you're talking about workplace burnout and all of those, to be very open about how you speak about mental health and mental illness. And so I realized within the first lockdown that I was at the peak of a binge eating disorder. It's probably something I had suffered with my entire life, but I didn't realize. I had always considered myself like a grazer, like I eat little, but all day long. But within the first lockdown and living away from my parents and all of that, like it got really, really bad. So I sought help for that, and there are amazing resources out there, and especially in Cork City. And I managed to fit like years worth of recovery into a number of months. That was one of the positive things for me with lockdown, and not being able to go anywhere and being unemployed and all the rest. It offered me that time to invest into myself. And then I came out the other end. I won't say I'm recovered, because I'm not entirely sure I believe in being recovered from an illness like that. It's more like you're managing it, but it gets easier to manage with every passing day. And so I've come out from the tough end of that, a much stronger person. And that has allowed me to do something that I've wanted to do for years, but never had the confidence to do before. So now I'm full-time self-employed. I'm not just freelancing between jobs. At first I was a freelancer trading under my own name, but now I'm setting up I have registered a business name, and I'm going through the trademarking process, and it's very exciting to be your own boss and work your own hours and all of those things. And I'm a very nocturnal person. I'm much more creative at 3 a.m. than I am between the hours of 9 to 5. And when you're your own boss and you do something like copywriting, which doesn't nobody cares when you do it as long as the work arrives on time. So for me, being able to work those silly o'clock hours, as I call them, it all just works out well for everybody. But working for somebody else, that isn't always possible. And I think it's more flexible now than before. But at the same time, most businesses, they're open between 9 and 5. They have to be contactable between 9 and 5. And that means everybody who works there has to be contactable between 9 and 5. And that doesn't always work for me. I can try my best, but it doesn't. And especially between the summer months like we have now. It's part of being a redhead, we feel the heat more extremely than anybody else. I keep my hot water bottles in the freezer during the summer, and I take them out as needed. And it's easier for me to work at night when it's cold and sleep during the day, And I'm far more productive than trying to stay awake during the day when I feel dizzy and like I'm going to pass out from the heat, So yes, now I'm full-time self-employed. I wouldn't go back. I love it, and I think my clients recognize the better output from me working all night. At the same time, I'm very considerate about my communications with clients. If I'm emailing them work at like 3-4 in the morning, I'm going to schedule that email just in case they don't sleep with their phone on silent like I do. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling now. You asked
brilliant,
like a question, and I've been speaking for 10 minutes.
I loved all of that, and it's just testament. It's something that comes across in your work and the stuff I've seen of you, of how strong you are and how good you are. So kudos for that. And I actually, the other thing there is, you'll probably hire someone soon, and they will take the daytime, and you'll be a 24-hour business working all different time zones. So I'm sure it can benefit you in the long run being nocturnal. My main question, which is probably obvious at this stage, but what do you see as your main strength in digital? What is your main traffic drivers to a website or for a business?
Um, hmm. Like, I suppose, and it's becoming more and more important now than ever before with the rise of AI, but authenticity is so important. People buy from people, they don't really buy from businesses and business names. You know, people say that brands rule the world, but more and more we see people going back to shopping local and supporting smaller businesses, supporting people that they know, and so on, and being able to bring your authentic personality into, say, your marketing, your social media, and so on. um, people people resonate with that. They want to see themselves in what they're seeing. They want to be able to imagine themselves using your product, using your service, and that's so much easier for them if you are putting your real self out there, rather than a persona. You know, we've seen in the past that people present a different persona of themselves on Instagram than they would on LinkedIn, for instance, because there was this notion before that there are different audiences there. But at the end of the day, um, at the other end of both of those platforms is other humans. We all have many of the same things in common, you know, and we want to see we we want to see people being themselves, and when they're not themselves, it's really obvious, and it can ruin a brand. You know, we see that happen all the time, people being caught out. And cancel culture is rife now, and it's not stopping anytime soon. So I would say, like, just don't think about it too much, just be yourself. If you think your product is great and your service is great and it excites you, let that come across. Don't hold yourself back. Don't say, oh, I can't appear to be too excited because then I'm just rubbing it on thick. No, if you're really excited about what you're doing, let that show. And if you're not excited and you feel like you have to put something on, when you're presenting yourself in your socials and your marketing, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board with your product and your service. Maybe it needs one tweak to perfect it, and then you'll get excited about it, and then that will come across and other people will connect with that, and they'll resonate with that, you know.
Great.
I hope that answers your
It
question.
does.
I'm not sure, I'm around.
No, it completely does. And is there any campaign work that you're really proud of that you can tell our audience today?
um Campaign work, I suppose I'm working on a few larger campaigns at the moment, but at the same time, I can't talk about them because I've signed NDA. You know, I have to keep all those things under wraps before launch. Um, but something I'm seeing more and more opportunity for in all the jobs that come my way is inserting inclusive language. And I wouldn't say that there's ever been the intention for any of my clients to be exclusionary in what they say. There's just so many things that we're so used to saying that aren't actually that inclusive. For instance, using the word chairman instead of chairperson. It's so simple, but the word chairman just implies that only a man can do that job, which isn't true at all. So I won't ever say I have all of the answers, but I have such a passion for inclusive language that I'm constantly, like, learning. I'm constantly educating myself about all the various subjects within that, whether it be gender versus sex, which is rife everywhere. People constantly using woman and female and man and male interchangeably when they're not the same thing at all. Or how to talk about race and ethnicities and all the rest. And I even have I have a bit of a grow for anti-speciesist language. It comes back to me being, you know, the vegan. I'm vegan for the animals. So I don't like when people compare other people to animals in a negative way. It's often very inaccurate and it's very derogatory to the poor animals. But simple things like, instead of saying killing two birds with one stone, I say feeding two birds with one scone. It's so simple, but it's so much more positive. And a lot of people, I can nearly sense the eye rolling as I talk about anti-speciesist language, right? But at the end of the day, a lot of speciesist language is quite violent, and violence begets more violence, and it normalizes a lot of violence. So it starts with animals, and then it's, I don't know, smacking children, and then it's, it's a snowball effect as to what's acceptable. And well, that's how I see it anyway. And that's why I feel so strongly about all manner of inclusive language. This is the point where we need to stop and be more intentional about what we say and what we write, because those affect what we do and how we think. And it's the first step in a bit of a better world. Not to talk too loftily about it, but I suppose as a writer, my entire world revolves around words and the impact that has on the world. So that's my perspective. That's how I see it. It starts with what we think and what we say, and that leads into what we do. So
just, yeah, I'm inspired. I'm so impressed by that. Yeah, I need myself personally to be more aware of things like that, but it's a building process, everyone. I do feel like that whole part of culture is really evolving now, and people are more aware. But it's still, you fall into your old habits. The two birds with one stone is something I've said many times before, but I will start thinking about feeding two birds with one scone. It's a much nicer and funny saying compared. Okay, my next question is software. Obviously, content writer, content creator, you must use certain softwares to aid your work and build out.
I suppose, especially when I started out, I ended up with more American-based clients than I thought I would. And as you know, I mean, there are many basic spelling differences between British English, which we would use, or Hibernian English, depending on your persuasion, and American English. And so, rather than Googling all the time, I started using a wonderful program called Grammarly. And what's wonderful about Grammarly is that it won't just tell you what to change, it'll tell you why to change it. So you're learning as you go. And now I don't have to use it anymore because I'm so used to American English and how it works, and the various types of differences there. But other than that, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be one of those writers who uses ChatGPT a lot. I'm still a Googler, and that's because I know that ChatGPT only has its knowledge up until a certain date. And everything that I'm Googling would have happened in the past 6 months at least. So, yeah, let me think.
How about
I can't think of anything else. I'm quite old school. I started out with pen and paper. A lot of people won't do that, but I started with pen and paper. Well, I used to. I'm a bit more a lot more environmentally conscious now. So I might I've taken to whiteboards and things like that. But yeah, I almost never start out with typing. And I think it's because when you start out with typing, it's always a blank page. Whereas if you start out with a notebook, it's lined. It at least has some ink on it. It doesn't look as scary, as intimidating. Or if you put a little scribble on it, there's something there, and it's not as intimidating looking. But the blank page, I think, is the writer's worst obstacle. Is that beginning section. Yeah, but as for other softwares now, I can't say I use much beyond Grammarly. I'm very old school that way.
how about for new insights or new information? Where do you go to learn more?
Honestly, LinkedIn, it's a very underrated platform, and it's not just my connections, it's what they share from their connections. It's it's wonderful. It's not as much of an echo chamber as some of the other social media platforms. You don't always see just the things that you're interested in. What ends up in my feed are things that I would have never Googled before, never looked into before. And, there's a lot of people on LinkedIn creating really excellent and insightful content. And I suppose the more people that react with the insightful option, the more people end up seeing it. I think that's part of their algorithm rather than it just being topic based, if that makes sense. But yes, I've discovered LinkedIn is just the best place for learning new things. I mean, that's where the experts are. We used to say the experts were on Twitter. I don't I wouldn't say that anymore. There's too many bots on Twitter. But yeah, no matter your industry, the experts are on LinkedIn. It just starts with finding one of them, and you'll see their content. You will see the experts that they follow and that they share, or that they even like. Never mind share. And then you'll follow them, and then you'll see all of the things that they enjoy, and it's a wonderful I mean, it is a networking platform, and that's exactly what it's there for. But I would say it's very much an underrated platform that way.
And the article section within LinkedIn is probably perfect for your line of work as well, to get bigger reach and get some of your content out there. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I I don't use it that much. I'm terrible about talking about myself, which is why I was a tiny bit nervous to come on here today. And that's just part of being a copywriter. I'm always so passionate about talking about my clients, and then someone asks me a question about myself, and I'm like, I don't know. And so when it comes to talking about myself, I almost never post on any social media. I'm terrible at my own digital marketing. It is something that is like a goal of mine for this year and next, is to build my own platforms like that, rather than just sharing my clients, which is currently what I do. I'm very good at engaging and lurking in the shadows of social media, but no, terrible at putting myself out there. But it is a goal. It is a goal of mine for this year.
I think, especially from doing this show, most marketers really struggle with that. Like we none of us, and it's partly probably because we're doing it in our day jobs for businesses and other people all the time. The last thing then you want to do is work on your own one. But yeah, like the reality is we have to do it, and one post a week is better than no posts a week. That's kind of how I see it as well. In terms of like upskilling, is there any areas you're really looking around at the moment, Pam, that you're thinking, oh, I'd love to learn more about that?
Well, as I said, I'm constantly educating myself on various types of inclusive language. But I'm not even sure if this qualifies as upskilling, because it may not necessarily help with my work, but I love communicating with people, and I want to communicate with as many people as possible. Now, I am terrible at other spoken languages. Absolutely terrible. German and Irish at school, no. Scrape by. But I recently started learning ASL. That's American Sign Language, for anyone who doesn't know. I'm not sure why I chose sign language specifically, but it's just something I've always wanted to learn, and I finally started. And for anyone wondering why I chose ASL instead of ISL, it turns out they're basically the same. They're very, very similar in how they work and the various signs in that. They come from the same family of sign languages, and I found one a course online that was really, really good. And because I live in the absolute middle of nowhere, so going to in-person classes is a bit much. But I found this online course, and it's wonderful. And you get to you get to practice then with people online and meet new people who I wouldn't have otherwise had any opportunity to speak with unless it was over email or text or whatever. So it's opened doors, you know, for me, gaining new perspectives and insights from people I otherwise wouldn't have been able to communicate with. So that's been really fun. Yeah, and just, I suppose, upskilling when it comes to running your own business. I mean, you have to get to know how to do your bookkeeping and pay your taxes and pay your VAT and all of that. I've learned a lot of those things this year. And that was one of the main things that ever put me off setting up my own business, was dealing with my taxes and this like fear of doing it incorrectly. I was just saying to my friend yesterday that like Irish people growing up, we'll say in the 90s and before, we didn't have the boogeyman. We had the taxman and the TV license inspector. Those are the two that you didn't answer the door to. That was always the way. But so I always had this fear that if I did my books wrong, then, you know, I'd be in trouble and all the rest. That put me off. But it's actually much easier than you would think it is. And, you know, because I'm a sole trader, my books are pretty easy. So I don't currently need an accountant. It's easy for me to do it myself. And becoming VAT compliant, I thought would be a massive deal, but it's actually not. It's easy to set up. Every 2 months, you fill out your form. That takes less than 5 minutes, and then you pay your bill. So if there's anybody listening or watching who is thinking about setting up your own business but is afraid for those kind of reasons, I would say don't let it stop you. It stopped me for years, and now I wish I had started years ago, because it's not half as daunting as you would think it is. And also, your bookkeeping is not the same as Leaving Cert Accounting. It's far less complicated than Leaving Cert Accounting.
Well said. Pam, unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you the last question of the show, which I end every show with, which is, if you could bottle up one personality trait that you have yourself, Pam, that you could pass on to others, what would it be?
Oh my. This comes back to like not being very good at talking about myself,
Yeah,
doesn't
it does.
I suppose I like to think I'm a very empathetic person, and that, you know, feeds into my ability to speak about mental health and mental illness very openly. You know, in the workplace, I think sometimes there's people feel a little bit of stigma there, that they can't admit that they're having a tough day, or that they're going through a tough time and all of the rest. And I think showing a little bit of empathy every day makes any workplace that much more comfortable, you know, for everybody there. And, you know, running yourself into the ground and working all of the hours that the universe sends, it's not what life is about. And I think, you know, lockdowns proved that, and COVID proved that. And so I would say, yeah, just show empathy and compassion for those around you, and you'd be surprised as to what happens then, you know. And you'll build relationships so much faster and so much easier that way as well. You know, and you won't just end up with clients that return to you. You'll end up with friends, you know. Quite a few of my clients have become friends of mine. You know, we'll start out talking about whatever gig that they need doing, and then we'll talk about the next time that we're going to meet up for lunch, you know, and not a business lunch, a social lunch. And, you know, before that wouldn't have been the way. There'd have been very clear boundaries between clients and service providers. And I think as well, when you build proper friendships with some of your clients, you get to know them and their authentic selves and their brands better. And if you're a copywriter, for instance, like, you can emulate that so much better in your writing, when you're writing blog posts for them or articles for them, or landing pages and things like that. You know, it's so much easier to mimic their voice into your writing, because a lot of people, you know, nobody knows their story better than those clients. But when asked, they might not necessarily be the best person to tell that story. But if you know what their voice is and what their authentic self is when they're feeling comfortable and chatting, you can emulate that then when you're writing about them. That was a very long-winded answer.
Brilliant
I'm very
answer.
sorry. But I think I answered the
Yeah,
question.
you did. No, that was fantastic, Pam. Pam, I'm sure people want to touch base with you after this. How can they find you?
The best place to find me is by searching for Pam Ryan on LinkedIn. My email address is pamnireen@gmail.com. So that's Pam full stop NI full stop or IAIN@gmail.com. I had to go with my Irish name because my English name was taken.
Well, honestly, Pam, thanks so much for a wonderful episode. I hope everyone loves listening and watching. And yeah, thanks everyone.